Thank you for taking the time to join this session today. So my name is Martin and I work for Carta. So my background is in marketing technology and I've worked with just about every platform there is over the years, both good and bad. But my primary focus of recent times is to understand how we can transition away from the traditional monolithic suites towards a leaner, more flexible stack to suit modern user and development needs. So that means the usual suspects, so Contentful, microservices, cloud native development, and also the Jamstack. So a bit about Carta. We're a global consultancy with 1,600 employees and 11 offices, and we're based out of London. We do work for some of the biggest clients in the world across many industries, and there's 5 examples you can see there. But also we've got the cooperative group, which is a Contentful account, Farrow and Ball, famous for paint, Cortiva AgriScience, London North East Railway, and there's many others. We aim to build long-term relationships with the clients, and in fact, about 40% of our clients have been with us for 6 years or more. So on Contentful, we've been working with them for years now. We've got many experienced Contentful specialists in the organization, certified as well. And in December last year, we actually achieved the gold partnership status. So excuse me for the sales pitch, but if you're looking for some good Contentful experience, good SI, you'll not go far wrong with Carta, no matter where in the world you are. So the headless wave, I'm sure a lot of the veterans amongst you, especially in IT, will understand the IT industry certainly follows those waves in terms of trends. So in fact, headless CMS has been around for a long time and has roots back in some very early platforms, but those didn't stick due to inherent lack of maturity in the surrounding technologies that required to make them work. But this time, rather than be simply another wave that breaks to be replaced by another, Agile CMS, I think, is being cemented in the digital vernacular. And this is because of 3 core reasons. So number 1, the digital economy and the economy in general changes so quickly these days that having that flexibility of stack is really table stakes to a modern organization. If we look at the last 12 months as an example, organizations that have been fairly nimble will be the ones that win out overall or even survive. And long-term investments, big CapEx investments in huge kind of monolithic suites of technology will put your business plan at the mercy of the vendor and not yourselves. The cloud infrastructure revolution certainly has happened, spinning up global infrastructure now to power the entire digital estate can be done as quickly as it took you to drive to the local data center that you hosted all your technology applications in to replace a rack server, for example. And we've got much better open standards, so the integrations are being much more commoditized, and the engineering experience required to deliver is far more global. It's within reach, and we're not sort of going down those very proprietary stacks that maybe limit significantly the amount of people that you can get to work on your platform. However, when you consider it from a marketing point of view, it's not really sort of got any easier. If anything, it's actually got a lot more complicated. So what's not changed is the amount of digital content that exists in different channels and how to get that content from A to B, essentially to drive those digital experiences. So you really need to be able to do that quickly. So get that digital content produced, translate it to a digital form, and then publish it to your digital estate. So I work mostly on the marketing technology side of IT, and this is the place where CMS infrastructure is most prevalent and is where the battles really occur to stick a more decoupled solution. So at an enterprise level especially, you may have tens or even hundreds of different websites and web applications to manage. And you're probably coming from a legacy of a heavyweight, fairly tightly integrated WYSIWYG-based CMS, and that's got features galore with the promise of everything in one box. It doesn't matter that you end up using less than 10% of them. It's quite a strong sales pitch. So in my opinion, we need to shift that focus within Agile CMS from the tech argument, which has been pretty much won now, in my opinion. So the product development focus itself needs to make lots of strides towards making that internal CMS user journey as good as it can be, as easy as it can be, so we can really empower the business users to really make the job as simple as possible without requiring loads and loads of IT involvement. So I think we actually have a duty to ensure that the context of any tools we use are presented in the way to marketing and editorial teams that A, is most relevant to them, and B, offers the lowest barriers to success. So if you sum that up, the TLDR, if you will, of everything that I've just said, is we really must strive to create the best possible experience for our internal marketing and content users and preserve the essence of what makes Agile CMS so powerful. So still having that power available to innovators within your digital teams to do something amazing and really push the needle. And the subtext of that is you're in really good hands with Contentful, really listening to the users, providing some really good new tooling on top of Contentful's UI, for example, the creator and the launch apps. And actually, we're undergoing a piece of work ourselves to do a bit of transformation around our website at Carta. So moving some of that from a big heavyweight monolithic CMS, which is difficult to use, over to Contentful to really lean off that process and make it really simple to publish our content to all our digital channels. So I'd now like to talk to you about just a few things, 5 things actually, in my experience, that I think you should really consider when making that journey to make Contentful as easy as possible for your CMS users. They're in no particular order. Maybe the first one and the third one are particularly important, but I think they've all got their merits. So number 1 is certainly hire a business analyst when you're doing any sort of migration. So unless you're building a totally new business from the ground up, your startup, for example, it's really likely you'll be undertaking some sort of transformation, some change management, migration activity between the old world and the new world. And it's probably fair to say that both marketing teams and engineering teams can be quite an opinionated, emotive bunch of people. And we've seen projects like this which have failed before because maybe there's been a lack of common and deep mutual understanding as to the requirements, the constraints, the trade-offs that we need. And we've all seen projects that have, in all good intentions, have just ended up replicating the old system, warts and all. So you end up actually just spending all your money on trying to get feature parity rather than creating something truly that changes the game. And a BA, I feel, acts as that common glue between those teams. They act as a source of truth, they act as an arbiter, they act as a very objective view of the world, and they can also be accountable to ensure that we're indeed building that progressive platform that will have a positive impact. So really resist the temptation to think you can't justify a BA because of the cost, or maybe you can cast somebody else who isn't necessarily a BA to play that role. In our experience, having one pays off very quickly in the long run in terms of alignment and reducing that future technical debt. So really, I would say hire a BA. And there's no other content necessary to back this up, just hire a BA if you're going to do this activity. Number 2 is storing the relevant data and making it really easy to work with. So in a traditional headless model, there can be a lot of subcomponents which are brought together to create a single component that's used on a website or similar. And it can be really tempting because of the power of Contentful's modeling tools to want to store everything in Contentful because it's API first and we can all get at the data via our tech systems, right? So I'd really resist that temptation initially and think about the context of where this data is going to be used. how it could scale and how it could impact those jobs to be done for your editors and also other teams. So I'd say overall system design and really thinking about that full context is really important. And again, just to reinforce, the first point is precisely why the BA is worth their weight in gold. As an example, let's say you've got a store finder, you're a big retail company, and you need to be able to manage the opening hours, store information, those kind of things. Now, it may be tempting to jump straight in and go, actually, I can create a stores model like this that you can see, which has different components attached to that store. You could have information, you could have assets about that store. You know, it may well be fine if you've got 5 stores, but if you're a big global retailer with thousands of stores, I'd be really wary about doing this. Imagine the editors that need to create these things manually, add hundreds, maybe thousands of updates to these components, and then deal with change. So if there's a big change, you need to update an opening hour across all of them. That becomes a laborious task indeed. And it also asks like layers of access onto your data. So you'll have to go through Contentful APIs to get this data for other applications where it may need to be in a different context. So it may actually make more sense from an overall scalability perspective to create a store management app using the incredible Contentful app extension capabilities and leverage some of the automation power of Contentful. So actually you can create a decoupled system, so for that store data, which is a single source of truth and a system of record in its own regard. Other systems don't need to then go through Contentful to access that data. You editors can use a kind of specialist GUI to perform bulk operations, so big updates, some mass changes, and you can actually automate a lot of the creation of these components using the Contentful API. So that really increases the amount of work that you don't do actually, which is really important, but it still allows manual overrides. If you need to at that store level, for example, from a content editor, say one store needed to change, you can really quickly change that on the website just by overriding the component, and it won't affect the source data. Let's say it was a temporary thing that you needed to do. So I'd say that's a really big learning. So if you do decide to store some complex data types within Contentful, really look at leveraging those UI extensions or the app framework, because that can really put a nice presentational view of that complex data and make it much more contextual and easy to understand than just having thousands of fields that have really no meaning whatsoever. Point 3, and it's a very important point, is you really need to invest in creating a fast feedback loop, i.e. a fast preview function. So if you're doing a transformation activity from an old system, you may be used to a WYSIWYG-based tool like the one on the left here, where you can essentially build pages from components and see immediately what that visual impact is going to be. And on the right-hand side, you've got the traditional Contentful interface, which is it's quite technical. It doesn't infer any presentational things, but really, yeah, that's great from a structured content and reuse point of view, but your editors really want to see what this is going to look like. So we would suggest absolutely really investing in that preview function and make it really fast, so you don't leave anything to assumption or chance. Make that preview as close to one-to-one as possible, mirroring your production environment. So that means bringing in any data integrations you've got. Don't just placeholder it, really give them as accurate a representation of the final output as possible and make it really fast. That point, I can't emphasize it enough. So we conducted some research and found that there's actually a tolerance of about 5 seconds before people start to get a bit tetchy about whether this has actually worked with a preview function, and it kind of gets worse from there. So they might think about making a coffee if it's not available within 5 seconds, but then if you get beyond that, it can get into the realms of wanting to threaten to have the IT team fired because this whole thing doesn't work. Maybe I quit's the extreme option, but it really doesn't cement the sort of sticking that headless sort of CMS. If you've got a really, really slow preview function, people will tend to blame the platform rather than the implementation. So I'd really make that a priority for implementation with your IT teams. Now, there can be tech challenges to get to that 5-second goal. With a more dynamic server-based architecture, it may be relatively straightforward to achieve, and you can probably almost get to a real-time representation of that content, but be careful about busting your API quotas. But if you're using a Jamstack approach, so you're using a static site generator, you need to take care that that static site generator will actually scale and provide the speed that you're looking for. And nothing's worse than, and I've been there, I've got the t-shirt myself, than using an SSG that actually can take up to an hour to build the whole site before your users can see that single paragraph that they've changed on a content component. So I'd recommend looking at certainly the modern frameworks. I'm sure a lot of people are using these anyway, but Gatsby, Nuxt.js, Next, or even if you want to go pure static, Hugo, because it's super fast for those real incremental build capabilities that you get. And that'll enable you to create those scalable previews much more easily. Number 4 is leveraging Contentful's new tools, the Compose tool and the Launch tool. So first, on Compose, it gives you a very page-centric view of the content model, which is far more suitable for a website use case. The page is the lowest atomic unit that is published, so that's typically a one-to-one relationship between what the end users themselves will access. And those are composed of different types. So the page type itself may be a news page, it might be a store finder page, as we showed before. And that just explicitly defines those component constraints, i.e. what you can and can't use on those pages to keep it really focused and simple. And then you can implicitly control things like layout in that as well, or perhaps explicitly with some settings that you add on yourself. And it also gives metadata types. So there'll be a lot of metadata on pages that you'll need. So Contentful Compose provides a default SEO metadata type. But you can also add your own, and I encourage you to do that. So things like open graph tags, any other meta information that needs to go on the page, you can just attach it to that and then add it to the page. So it provides a much more, I guess, a complete interface for those content editors. Rather than just the component view, you actually get an inline view of that page content itself, so you get the full composition. And what you can also do to reduce that informational complexity is use the composition relationships function. So you can actually decide whether to show the full field set that may be a component, like the example here, I've got author. You might just need to know that it's an author with a title. You don't necessarily need to know the full component structure underneath. That's kind of information hiding for the editors. So that really simplifies that view of the content. Launch gives your team a compiled view of all the content and assets which comprise a campaign. So especially in big organizations, you might have multiple campaigns, multiple types of content that are used in that campaign. With the traditional Contentful UI, it can be a bit, let's say, challenging to find that, especially if you've got a lot of content. So what this does, it gives you a way to kind of categorize that content under a campaign. And it also gives you a way to manage your kind of understanding across your teams of when things are going to be released. So it has a calendaring function built in. So once you've scheduled a release, it will appear on that calendar. And you can also add some workflows around the creation of that content. So particularly in enterprise scenarios, especially in regulated industries, a lot of the content may need to go through multiple review stages before you're allowed to publish it to the website. So it essentially becomes approved. But you might not want that full workflow engine that's very kind of complex, assigns JIRA tickets to people, etc. You might want a more visual representation of that. And that's what Launch will actually provide you, more of a visual way of seeing, actually, this content is in X state or Y state. This is the group or user that needs to do something with it next. And installing both Compose and Launch is very easy. You just simply add the apps to a space and then you're off and running. So as an example, I created a piece of content in a product set. So I'm launching a new product. All I do is create that through Compose, or I can do it the traditional way with the UI. I create a release name and then apply a scheduled publish date using the Contentful sidebar. And then the content itself will be added to that release. And then I can go to this calendaring page, click on the content, and I'll be able to see when that's going to be released. And a quick tip with the pages and in Compose, you don't actually need to go through every single subtype that's on your page to put that into a release. You just need to set the top level itself, and then any content that's within that group page will actually be released automatically when that page is published. So creating workflows is simply creating different states. So I've done one here, legal review, and you assign that content type that's allowed to go through that particular workflow. So in this case, a page. And again, I just need to set that workflow state in the sidebar. After I've edited my content, I need this one to go legal review, for example. Set that, and then my content is in that state, and back to the dashboard, I can then go and see the current status of any content. So I know that this page needs to be legally reviewed, and once that's done, I would assume that you would put ready to go, and then it can be published. And finally, number 5, this is more of a macro view. So content operations is concerned with kind of connecting your strategic goals as an organization, as a marketing organization, for example, with the actual end state of content distribution itself. So that involves 3 areas. So the people who are involved in that, the actual processes itself, and the technology that you're going to use. So with Contentful API first products, you can actually get some tremendous power here, connecting your content workflows and actually processes into other systems. So you may use digital asset management software, you may use other collaboration tools, you may use Jira, Trello, etc. All these tools are really API driven, and actually you can automate a lot of this content operations pipeline, which actually enables a lot of efficiencies to be gained by, for example, not doing loads of manual workflows, manual content entry, etc. You can really look at streamlining those operations by automating those things. At Carta, we have a dedicated content operations team. We call it Managed Experiences. We actually manage some of the content workflow for 2 of the biggest organizations in the world. That's globally as well. So putting this type of content into manual processes, it needs a lot of staff. It is prone to error. So our processes leverage tools and things like the workflows and a lot of API work to really make sure that that content moves from A to B. And there's a lot of quality checks on that as well. So we use automated quality software, quality management software, which actually gives you a dashboard of actually all the KPIs that your content needs to hit throughout those stages. And then we can get that consistency. We can look at branding. We can look at accessibility to make sure that when your users are looking at that content, any one of your digital estates across your enterprise, they're getting a really consistent and uniform experience. So I'd really recommend, if you're going to do any of this activity, really look at your content operations model as well during it, because chances are you've been used to more of a legacy workflow with an existing CMS or suite that maybe can be made much more efficient and effective with headless CMS itself. So that's it, a very short and sweet talk there. So that's it. So 5 quick points there. I hope it was useful to you. Really enjoyed preparing this talk. Like I say, we have loads of experience at Carta. Happy to have any conversation with anybody about anything to do with Contentful. So my email is there for you if you would wish to contact me. But thank you again, and I'll open the floor now for any questions you may have. Thanks.